Welcome to my small presentation on release operator. This is a small series called Explained in 3 minutes, where we will try to explain concepts we have currently in Giant Swarm in 3 minutes, starting off with with release operator. The first thing about release operator to understand is obviously what are releases. So in this case, releases are defined in our Giant Swarm-releases repository, and then they define the apps and components that are part of like a Giant Swarm release version. So when a customer selects like a Giant Swarm cluster to create with a specific version, these components are included in that version. This release is basically a YAML representation that turns into a custom resource on the control plane. So it's like a Kubernetes object. What does that look like? You have a small example on the right, which I narrowed down quite a bit. So there's the kind release, which is the custom resource release, which we use, the version, which is in this case, we 12.1.3, and then we have like some spec, which has like apps. In this example, I only included core DNS and some components. Those can be, for example, operators. In this case, I selected AWS operator in version 8.8.0. So this is basically what a release is. And now the next thing is like, what is actually the relation between releases and operators? So in the previous example, we saw a release that has a specific operator defined, and here we see the same. So here we have a release in version 12.0.0, and it contains AWS operator 2.0.0. So the release defines a relation to an operator, and that operator is AWS operator 2.0.0. So when this release exists and a customer wants to create a cluster with that release, AWS operator 2.0.0 should exist and handle that cluster creation and cluster management. Then we can add a second release, which would be release 12.0.1. And here we also have release AWS operator 2.0.0, meaning that maybe we change something else in the release, like a different component got changed, but it reuses the same AWS operator. So the version of AWS operator didn't change between the versions 12.0.0 and 12.0.1. So we still only need one AWS operator 2.0.0. But then in the next stage, maybe we added release 12.1.0, which now has a patch release of AWS operator. So now AWS operator would be 2.0.1. And this obviously implies that, hey, we need a new AWS operator because if someone is using release 12.1.0, they need AWS operator 2.0.1. So we have this relation going on. And this obviously works in reverse as well. So if we have like progressed far enough and no customers using release 12.0.0 anymore, we can remove this release. But AWS operator 2.0.0 still needs to be maintained or still needs to be around, because we still have release 12.0.1 over here, which requires this operator. But as soon as we remove now release 12.0.1 as well, we can get rid of release operator 2.0.0 completely. And we only have like 2.0.1 around, as long as we have the release on the left side here, 12.1.0 around. So now this relation should be kind of clear. Pretty easy. When we have a release that mentions the operator has to exist and to run. So what does release operator do? Release operator basically builds and manages the relation between releases and operators. Here again, the same image we saw just a few slides before. And release operator now maintains the correctness, because this relation is not somehow automatic, it's not magical. So we have release operator sitting in the middle here. And release operator actually does the operation of reading the releases and then creating the other apps which contain the operators. So in this case, release operator reads all of these releases, calculates the correct list of operators to put out, and then basically gives us the deployments for these operators. So it allows us to deploy operators through our releases, and it basically guarantees us that when we define a release, the operators will also be deployed and will be managed correctly and will exist. So this is a very brief introduction of a release operator. and the function it has in our ecosystem, basically only managing when a release exists, the operator should also exist. And when a release is removed and the operator is no longer mentioned, the operator should also be removed. Thank you very much for listening.